Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Brighton and Hove City Council's Cabinet. I'd like to inform those present that this meeting is being webcast live and will be capable of repeated viewing. Do any members wish to declare any interest in relation to any matters that are included on today's agenda? Councillor Daniel?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I work for an organisation that is funded through our third sector programme and have received dispensation to speak.
Thank you. Councillor Alexander?
I'm a member of the Brighton and Hove Food Partnership Board, and I've been granted a dispensation to vote and speak.
Thank you, Chair. I've been granted dispensation because I am an allotment holder and my wife, Anna Mewton, she's a trustee of the Hangleton Knoll project.
Thank you, Councillor Mewton. Councillor Robin?
Thank you, Chair. I'm an allotment holder and also I chair the Fresh Start charity in Portslade, but I've been granted dispensation, I know I wouldn't be able to say that word, to speak and vote at this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Robbins. Understood. Any other declarations? Does Cabinet agree to the minutes of the previous meeting as an accurate record? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. Today's agenda reflects our determination to keep Brighton and Hove fairer, safer and more sustainable despite the pressures facing councils everywhere. The centrepiece today is our budget for 26-27, a net general fund of £341 million with a proposed 2.99% council tax rise and a 2% adult social care precept. This is our council plan in financial form, targeting investment where it matters most, tackling homelessness and inequality, driving climate action and improving neighbourhood services. The challenge is real. We began this process with a £25 million gap next year and over £80 million across the medium term. Our reserves remain among the lowest of any unitary authority, so returning to financial sustainability is our number one priority. We're delivering £12.4 million of savings according to the proposals that we will discuss today and launching a transformation programme to close the medium-term gap through reducing temporary accommodation costs, managing social care demand, increasing our income as a council and investing in digital and service redesign. To manage short-term pressures, we're also seeking £15 million of exceptional financial support from our Labour government. Not additional funding, but a vital flexibility to protect services, rebuild reserves while our transformation work takes root. We'll also consider today the housing revenue account and capital programme, supporting over 12,000 council homes with a focus on safety, energy efficiency and new affordable homes, with every investment tested for value and sustainability. And alongside that, we have reports today on our transport maintenance programme, investing in our roads and our pavements, the A259 seafront arches, vital infrastructure for our city's economy and seafront, and a proposed lane rental scheme to reduce roadworks disruption across the city. Our adult social care improvement plan is also coming forward today and sets out how we'll strengthen prevention, stabilise the provider market and improve outcomes for residents, helping to deliver both quality and financial stability. Today, we will also consider a report that was prompted by a notice of motion that was passed at our full council meeting last October. We were deeply concerned to learn, as a result of that amended notice of motion and my letter to the East Sussex Pension Committee, that as per 3.10 of today's report, the East Sussex Pension Fund holds approximately £29.8 million is invested in £29.8 million in companies identified by the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights. The list compiled by the OHCHR currently contains 158 involved companies, with involvement being defined as operations taking place in illegal settlements in the West Bank. Against this context, it's important to understand that Brighton and Hove City Council's role in investments held by the East Sussex Pension Fund. This council does not have its own pension fund and has no representation on the East Sussex Pensions Committee and therefore no control. Nonetheless, given this concerning disclosure, I'll be writing to the members of the East Sussex Pension Fund Committee, Conservative Councillor Gerard Fox, Green Councillor Georgia Taylor, Conservative Councillor Ian Hollidge, Conservative Councillor Paul Redstone and Liberal Democrat Councillor David Tutt to ask them to divest of funds that expose the pension scheme to companies identified in the list. We've watched in horror at the violence that has ensued in Gaza and the many thousands that have been killed. And we've also watched in horror at the terror unleashed on Israelis by the Hamas attacks of 7/10 and since. Our Labour administration was among the first to call for a ceasefire in November 23, and we've backed the Labour government's actions to get aid into Gaza, to apply arms embargoes on Israel, and to recognise the state of Palestine. Finally today, I want to say that the last week has not been an easy week to be a woman in the Labour Party. I believe that the decision to appoint Peter Mandelson as US ambassador that was taken last year by our government was the wrong decision. And I'm pleased to see that lessons will be learned from that. Our agenda today shows a council that is honest about the scale of the challenge, but ambitious about the city's future, restoring resilience, investing in the essentials and improving outcomes for those who rely on us most. I'd like to thank Cabinet colleagues and all our officers for their hard work in bringing these reports forward. And I look forward to our discussions and the decisions we'll take this afternoon on behalf of the city that we serve. We turn now to call over, and I propose that all items are reserved for discussion. Does the Cabinet agree? Our first and only piece of public involvement today is a question we have from Mark Strong concerning the A259 report on the Kings Road arches. Hi there, Mark. Would you like to read your question?
Thanks, Councillor Sankey. Later in the agenda, item 129 sets out the plans for major works on the A259 Kings Road arches. While I fully support the intentions of this work, there are concerns about impact on users during the construction, especially on active travel. Previous phases listed in paragraph 3.12 had significant effects on people walking, wheeling and cycling for long periods, especially during the works at the Shelter Hall. I note that the stakeholder list does not include representatives of any user groups, including those representing disabled people. In addition, the EQIA Equality Impact Assessment does not address the period of the works, but just the outcome. Can the Cabinet give an assurance that a much more inclusive approach will be taken during the work, using experience of other projects in the city, and that stakeholders will expressly include active travel and disability groups? In addition, could there be a place for a stakeholder rep on the project board? Thank you.
Councillor Mooton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mark, for your question. May I reassure you that we have fully considered active travel needs and requirements for disabled users. This was also presented and discussed at the Travel and Transport Partnership in the autumn, where representatives from several active travel groups and representatives from other stakeholders and community groups shared their views. Assessments have been carried out on the working areas during the construction during the construction phase. The plans clearly define the areas for highways traffic, cyclists and pedestrians, and all designated routes will be clearly marked. While some sections of the promenade will be temporarily segregated for safety reasons, the plans provide safe, accessible routes through the construction area. All widths have been assessed to ensure safe passing and adequate manoeuvrability for mobility aids, prams and buggies along the designated pedestrian routes. Similarly, routes for cyclists in both directions through these works will be carefully considered. The works will require temporary arrangements, and I'm sure you appreciate However, we have a commitment to keep traffic flowing, including motor vehicles, cyclists and pedestrians, safe and accessible throughout the planned works. Contractors will ensure that all signage is clear and appropriate, and staff will be trained to recognise issues and ensure compliance with the Equalities Act 2010, including making reasonable adjustments wherever required. We will work closely with the principal contractor once appointed to ensure communication and community engagement throughout each stage of the planned works.
Thanks very much, Mark, and thank you, Councillor Mooten, for the response. We turn now to issues raised by members. And the questions that have been submitted can be found published in our addendum for today. We've got 15 minutes in total set aside for member questions. And once we've reached time, I'll move to the next item and written responses will be sent for the remaining questions. We've received 14 member questions for this meeting. I understand that Councillor Hill is not in attendance. So I'll rotate through those members who are in attendance, asking you each to ask your first 2 questions as the fairest way to try and manage them. And then if there's time, I'll take further questions again in rotation. I have Councillor Lademacher. And she's not online. Okay. I want you to ask your question, please, Councillor Shanks. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. About the outdoor event strategy, so residents suggested a levy for their communities from outdoor events. Is this part of the strategy and how will it be run? I did eventually find the appendix, which wasn't in the original papers. It does suggest there will be, but it doesn't say how much it would be and how it would be worked out. It suggests there'll be some sort of finance. Anyway.
Councillor Robbins, I'm going to come to you.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, so it falls to me. Councillor Miller is not here at the moment, and I assume so. This is Councillor Shanks. This is question 4 you're asking about the levy. Yes. Yeah. Okay. This does form part of the proposal within the new event strategy, but currently does not detail the mechanism for delivery of the money, ensuring the scheme is designed to give residents a voice in how levies are applied to specific areas and take care and consideration to ensure the best possible outcomes. This is subject to ongoing conversation, and a full detailed methodology will be delivered and published as a priority when the strategy is adapted after Cabinet on the 12th of February.
Thanks, Councillor Robbins. Councillor Shanks, your second question.
So the council's recently received government money for youth hubs, but you're using this in the existing budget to prop up some of the existing youth service work around participation, etc., and around family hubs. Having looked at the description of what the money's for, I'm concerned that this isn't the use that it has been given for, and whether that's legal to do.
Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Shanks. I mean, first of all, it's obviously worth saying what great news it is that as a city we've been selected as one of the 8 pilot sites for the Young Futures Hub programme. I think that's a testament to some of the great voluntary sector bodies in the city already doing great work on youth services and youth futures, and also to officers in the council and to lobbying efforts around this. I think the first thing to say is that what is included in the budget has a partial element of that funding. And as you say, 75k of that is allocated to fund a full-time youth and commissioning service manager, and that post will support the strategic oversight of the Young Futures hubs, including the development of an integrated youth service. And then there's 24 grand used for a youth participation worker. The remainder of it is not allocated in the budget report, but is being allocated separately, and then will be submitted to the department, to government. But overall, the answer is yes. Both Directorate and Chief Financial Officer are confident this is exactly the appropriate use of the money, and the further allocation is to come.
I've got Councillor West. Is Councillor West not with us? Councillor Goldsmith.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is on the seafront arches. I'm really pleased that this is going ahead, but I have had some concern from businesses in my ward who are using these arches who are worried about their future. Some of these businesses have been there for a really, really long time and just aren't getting the assurance they need that they'll be able to stay there. So can the council confirm that as well as fair compensation, all businesses will be given priority for either a return to their original location or, where appropriate, alternative location to allow them to continue trading?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Goldsmith, for your question. The future and vibrancy of the seafront area are central to the Council's approach. We must not let this area decline or worse. The ageing structures support the main road, cycle route and promenade are at risk, and intervention is essential to prevent a potential catastrophic failure. That is exactly why this administration is taking this action. We must not leave these businesses to face such risks and thereby not have a future. We are working closely with every business affected so that they're supported through the process. The majority of businesses impacted by phase 4 and 5 will return to their original locations or one close by. There are 2 tenants will not be returning because of their existing units will no longer exist, and there is no equivalent replacement to return to. But those tenants, however, have businesses elsewhere on the seafront and will continue to trade there. They are entitled to statutory compensation under the Landlord and Tenants Act, along with the secure tenancy affected. Once completed, the new, larger and better designed units will provide an improved space for the enabled businesses to flourish.
Thanks, Councillor Mooton. Councillor Goldsmith, your second question.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mooton. So my second question is on the notice of motion from October. So our motion passed at full council included an explicit reference to a document that defines involved companies as companies which aid or assist in the commission of Israel's serious breaches of preemptory norms of international law, which may foreseeably assist in the commission of genocide and violations of the Geneva Conventions. However, this report uses an alternative definitions going against the request of the Council's supreme decision-making body. Will Cabinet ensure that a new report is created as soon as possible using the correct definition, ensuring requests made by full Council are properly implemented as constitutionally required?
Thanks for the question, Councillor Goldsmith. You seem to have misunderstood the terms of that notice of motion that was passed last October. The notice of motion was amended, and the final version of the notice of motion did not include the footnote that you refer to. In fact, footnotes never make up notices of motion. But more importantly, while the Council can consider publicly available information, it would not be appropriate for the finance or legal teams to reach definitive judgment in this council about which companies are or are not involved in violence or have been involved in violence in Gaza, given the complex, contested and sensitive nature of such assessments. That's rightly a matter for international investigators and the international court system. However, what this council can do and has done is act in relation to the UN resolution, which provides specific information that we are able to act on, namely the OHCHR list, which I referenced in my chair's comms, and which was explicitly cited in the notice of motion. We believe that the council should not have exposure to the companies identified in this list, and we will be making this clear to the relevant elected members in East Sussex. I would gently suggest that you could do the same, given that one of those elected members belongs to your political party, the Green Party, although as far as I can see, this particular elected member has made no public comment on the atrocities that we've seen in Gaza. So rather than political point scoring, I would suggest that you take it up with the elected member that belongs to your party. We are committed to ensuring that this council's investments are ethical, and we will ask partner councils in East Sussex to work with us towards an ethical investment framework. That brings us to a close, I believe, in terms of member questions. So we now turn to member representations, and I invite Councillor Shanks. we're done with questions, Councillor Goldsmith. If you'd like to take yourself away from the microphone. We will be providing written answers for those questions that have not been asked. You've asked your 2 questions. Councillor Shanks has asked 2 questions. There are no other councillors here. I won't be taking questions in the name of other people today. So please make your way. Please make your way away from the microphone, and we will now have Councillor Shanks's representation. Does she? Yeah.
I do actually have other questions that are in my name. That's the same.
Yes, sorry, I misunderstood. You can ask questions in your name, Councillor Shanks. My misunderstanding, you've got 2 more questions, I believe, Councillor Shanks.
Yes, I have. I can find them. So, TBM question. Will the administration ensure us that the ring fence grants for public health is being used correctly, as it's being used to prop up existing services which it didn't previously fund?
Councillor Alexander.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Shanks. I know this was also asked in the recent People's Scrutiny Committee as well. I can assure you that any use of public health funding is done strictly in accordance with the public health grant conditions. Public health grant funding doesn't only have to fund the public health team or our public health contracts. There are many council services that contribute to public health outcomes for people in the city, and provided they meet the public health grant criteria, they can be funded by the public health grant. For example, our school's mental health programme was previously funded by another department, but good mental health for our children is a high priority for our administration. And for the year ahead, it will now be funded from the public health grant. So please don't worry, none of the public health grant is being used to fund anything other than public health matters.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Your last question, Councillor Shanks.
So what other options for the arches were explored in the budget, capital budget? For example, to find private money, sponsorship, and not restoring the original design of the arches.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Shanks. Yeah, important question. I mean, we thought it was really important that we did proceed with the first phase of the arches. I mean, a real disaster, really, in the history of the city that the arches were left to decline so much over many decades, and that's not blaming any party, and a real sort of totemic symbol in the east of the city of neglect of the eastern seafront. And we don't believe in neglecting the eastern seafront. We believe investing in it. So I think it was really important that we started that renovation, which is now ongoing. It's great to see the lift shaft has now gone up, and I can't wait for that lift to be ready so that our eastern seafront can be fully disability accessible to our residents in the city. At the moment, it's quite tricky to get to that bit of the seafront if you're a disabled resident. I'm glad we're putting that right. In terms of the next stages, I mean, you're absolutely right. That is exactly what we're doing, is thinking about how can we fund the future phases. Now we're doing this refurbishment. We know all the things about how the arches have to be restored, albeit at great cost. It will be very expensive to do the future phases of those arches. And so we're now exploring, and that's part of the work of what the Seafront Development Board will be doing, is working out how can we fund that, probably in conjunction with national funders, perhaps lottery bodies, etc., heritage funders, but also needing to look at the commercialisation, which is, I think we do need to find ways to bring in commercial activity to that area of the city that can help fund, and then looking at design, location, etc. Obviously, it's a listed structure, and so we have to abide by the listing, but that will be an important part of the next stage.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Shanks, we move now to member representations because we don't have any matters that have been referred to the Cabinet for our consideration. So would you like to present your representation on item, I believe, 127, the Targeted Budget Management Report for month 9? You have up to 3 minutes to present, and we will keep to time.
Thank you. This is actually about the budget papers. I'm not sure where all that other stuff came from. Anyway, it's a very sad time for local government. And I worked for local government in the 80s and 90s when we had thriving youth services, libraries, community centres, etc. But things have been dire, obviously, since the austerity of 2010. But we all thought that Labour would bring a change. It is what they stood for, change. However, now Brighton and Hove plans to borrow 15 million and a record number of councils do the same. The councils are paying an average of £1 in every £5 to service debt to the public works loans, which is actually the Treasury. It's a ridiculous system, so the government makes money out of lending money to local government to fund public services. Labour's promised reforms of local government are only about multi-year settlements, which are important and welcome, though they do send us problems in the future and add an extra layer in devolution. There's no pledge to overhaul our archaic funding system. We can't even set our own rate of council tax without a referendum. The cap has been there since the 80s. For our council, the pressure on temporary accommodation outlined is obvious, but this requires changes in housing benefit system and rent controls nationally, which the Labour Party should be doing and you should be asking for. Some of this borrowing is earmarked for transformation projects, especially in adult social care, but we know this will be really difficult until the funding system sorts out nationally. The council's relying on digital changes, which takes residents further away from council services. And overall, we're cutting 90 posts and putting 40 staff at risk of redundancy. The LGA advising councils to make sure they only do statutory services, subcontract and get rid of in-house services. In your local manifesto, you promised to set up local community hubs and libraries to be developed into places like that. But we're actually selling off assets, £3 million in property, which is short-sighted and leave us next administration with an even bigger hole to fill. Closing Wellington Day Centre is contracting out. It's not always a money saving. Apparently, there's been no consultation with users on this. And the VCS argues that capacity is limited to other services and sufficient suitable day opportunity places are not available. Whitehawk Roundabout Nursery in our most deprived area, Labour pledged to keep all our nurseries open, but it's planning to contract out this important local provision. Other smaller cuts like community composting, youth arts, child pedestrian training, and generally large cuts like adolescent services are really worrying for the future of our city. We were promised that a Labour government plus a Labour council together would address Brighton and Hove's problems. Instead, they've made them worse and pushed even worse cuts into the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shanks, for that. I'm going to move us on to our substantive reports for this afternoon. Our first report is on our general fund revenue budget, capital and treasury management strategy for 26-27. And I'd like to invite Councillor Taylor to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I think that as a city and as a country, we face a choice. And I think the choice is, do we keep spending money, public money, to paper over the cracks of a broken system, or do we invest to try to fix the underlying issues? I argue that in this draft budget, we're choosing the latter, a genuine attempt to grapple with the unsustainable and unfair housing system in this city, which causes untold misery for many families in the city, but also huge financial pressure on the city council. The report we have in front of us is obviously the general fund revenue budget, our draft budget, capital and treasury management strategy for 26-27. Just to sort of recap the context, we published a draft budget in December last year, and now this is the full draft budget for next year. Next Thursday, this budget will go to overview and scrutiny session, 2 sessions of people in place to scrutinise the proposals, and then on to Budget Council the following Thursday, where we will debate and then set our legal budget for the coming year. In terms of the context, Cabinet members will be well aware, but it's worth recapping it, and obviously this links to one of the next items on target budget management. And that's to recap the pressures that we face as a council. And they are unprecedented, the pressures that we're talking about. In the budget papers and in TBM, we show the pressure on temporary accommodation and homelessness. And to give a sense of that scale, in the budget that we're currently operating in and that we set last year, we had a general fund budget of temporary accommodation, emergency accommodation, homelessness of £8 million. Now that's the general fund contribution over and above what can be claimed through housing benefit, i.e. the cost to the taxpayer and the general fund. That is forecast, and those forecasts are not, finger in the air. They're based on the current situation that we see in TBM. That's forecast to go from £8 million to £20 million in the coming financial year, more than doubling the overall financial pressure faced by the council. And that is not just a financial pressure, it represents two other really important things. It represents, as I say, families living in a precarious housing market, in a broken system, in a very unaffordable city, families and households and individuals being evicted by landlords, something that the Labour government are working to stop and prevent. And then families and individuals coming to the council quite rightly for support, for which we have a duty to provide for them. And so that 20 million represents real individuals and real families, but it also represents something else equally significant. Beyond, as I say, the pressure to the council, it represents a vast transfer of public money, whether it's council taxpayers' money in terms of the pressure or whether it's housing benefit money from central government, to the private sector, to private providers of emergency and temporary accommodation. All of that 20 million, none of that is going to council to repay assets that we've bought, houses that we've bought, nor government, who obviously don't run housing. It's all going to private providers of emergency and temporary accommodation. So just think about that as a system that's totally failing to support our families and our individuals in the city with affordable accommodation, secure accommodation, a steady life versus their income. It's totally failing to do that, and to compensate for that, we're chucking 20 million quid out the door to private landlords. A bonkers system of which many European countries would look at and think that we're crazy as a nation. And so, as I said in the beginning, what are we going to do to respond to that? Well, we have a couple of options. We could respond to that pressure of 20 million by saying, well, we've just simply got to cut the rest of our budgets to make up that 20 million. Or what we could do, which is what I propose and what we're considering today, is to try and fix the underlying issues. And there's a couple of ways that we're doing that in this budget. The first, and Councillor Williams will come on in the next report to the HRA budget, but the first thing to say is we're making probably the largest investment in new social housing for a decade, certainly budgets that I look back on, possibly longer. 112 million in new council and social stock. That's genuinely new building of affordable units in this city that will provide secure accommodation to our households and to our families. That compares to figures in previous years of more like 87, 90 million. So a genuine big increase in investment in new stock, but also 12 million to, it's badged in the report as tackling inequality, but a good chunk of that focused on temporary accommodation. And as we've discussed last year, this council needs to, and it is what we're going to be doing, make a step change in how temporary accommodation is provided in this city. In the future, we all hope, that there are virtually no families in temporary accommodation, because they should be in secure accommodation, either their own occupation of ownership or more steady private rental or more council stock. But there will be, we have to be honest, in the next couple of years, there will continue to be families that face this problem and that will require our support. So what we've got to do is bring that in-house. We've got to buy as many units as we can to provide the temporary accommodation. One, so that we're not got financial pressures on our budget, but two, so that we're not bunging all this money out to the private sector, which is a total failure. So those are the big investments that we need to make. And we're also making a number of other large investments in this budget, 10 million to sort out our roads and deal with the legacy of Tory underfunding and Tory potholes, as well as many other areas of frontline service that are being protected. Now, the second way that we're doing this, and as Councillor Sankey referred to, is that we're seeking more support from the government. At the last Overview and Scrutiny Committee, in response to a question, I said, yes, I think we do need more support from the government to deal with this issue of temporary accommodation. And so we're applying for £15 million of exceptional financial support. There's some claims that we'll pick up at Budget Council from opposition councillors about a begging bowl budget. I mean, utter nonsense, really. The parameters of what the government set out say that when you've got exceptional financial circumstances, you can take this flexibility to protect services. Now, if moving from 8 million pressure to 20 million pressure on TA is not an exceptional financial circumstance, I don't know what is. And so we're not doing this in any way ashamedly or embarrassed about it. We're proud of the fact that we are making use of this facility that will protect services and give us space to make the proper interventions to try and fix the underlying issue. We should also be honest and transparent and clear that there are difficult elements in this budget. And I do want to take a moment to talk to staff in the organisation, our brilliant staff in the council. As I've said before on different occasions, I spent my whole career in the private sector, and there's a myth in this country, a myth that is so untrue and pernicious, it's unreal, really. Everything that's great happens in this country happens in the private sector. All the dynamism and innovation happens in the private sector. It's absolute nonsense. There's brilliant officers in this council doing brilliant work, but I do want to acknowledge that it's a really difficult time for staff in the organisation for two reasons. One, the pressures that we're dealing with that I've just talked about, the pressures on services, and also the pressures to deliver positive things that we want to do in the city. We're an ambitious administration and we're pushing hard to make changes and improve things, but also want to acknowledge, obviously, the stress and anxiety that will come with restructures that are in the budget. There is some reduction in headcount to ensure we try to remain financially sustainable. So I know this is a difficult time for officers, and we, as councillors, thank them very to help us navigate this overall budget process. I also do just want to mention three other elements that we'll draw out in our discussion of the budget papers. The first is Wellington House, that I know Councillor Alexander is going to come on to. I want to be very clear that whilst it is in the budget, this is a consultation that will happen, and we will be talking to, and already are talking to, service users and staff about this service. This is a service that the actual service will need to continue to be provided, and quite rightly so, because the residents that use the service are entitled to a service. Now, whether that is then provided in a different sector and a different setting is what will be consulted on. Parking has also got to be mentioned. We've taken a different approach to previous Green administrations. We can't use parking as a cash cow. It's already very expensive in many areas, but there are some inflationary increases, and there are some areas where parking needs to come up to match surrounding areas and be a bit more equal across the city. And then lastly, council tax, which is, again, we're not running away from the truth, which is that we are proposing to put up council tax by the amount that is allowed. It's worth noting that we heard the news the other day that 7 councils, in addition to the many more that have already done it, are putting up council tax by more than the amount that is allowed and recommended by government. So yes, it has to go up, and of course council tax is not a percentage, so it doesn't go up with incomes like other types of tax, but that's an important part of the way that we will protect services. So overall, Chair, I think this is a budget that remains difficult because of the pressures that we face, but it's also a budget that genuinely tries to grapple with the underlying issues that we face, and that charts a course for the city to get to a more sustainable place whilst we deliver all the things that we've been doing for 2.5 years as administration. Reopening toilets, providing mental health facilities to young people, investing in play areas and playgrounds, investing in leisure facilities, tackling issues within our waste and recycling service, and tackling climate change, and of course investing in new housing. I would ask colleagues to support the budget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Taylor, for that typically clear and comprehensive report. I've got Councillor Williams first.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for that summary. I just want to talk a bit more as why it's a very sensible step to go for the exceptional funding in this situation. So to explain in more detail for everybody, so everybody understands this, the overspend in temporary accommodation is a consequence of the national housing crisis. I know, because I've been housing campaign for many years, has been going on for years, and we're dealing with really the tip of this right now. And, you know, we have the realities of a small global city with limited supply. We have high housing costs in this city and an above average prevalence of mental ill health and substance misuse that we're dealing with valiantly, may I say. Now, in context here, the demand for housing and homelessness services is increasing in scale and complexity. Now, most homelessness involves people living in temporary or insecure accommodation, not just rough sleeping. And more than 2,100 households in Brighton and Hove are currently in emergency and temporary accommodation. That is a huge amount of households. And this forms part of a devastating national picture, with many areas in our country sadly facing unprecedented need for temporary accommodation. And Brighton and Hove faces a unique combination of high demand, complex needs, acute supply constraints, and one of some of the highest housing costs in the country. Now, the impact of homelessness, as we have heard many times, but I just still want to reiterate, is profound. And access to a decent, affordable housing is fundamental, and a settled home, I firmly believe, is a basic human right. Homelessness disproportionately affects people who are already vulnerable. These including people fleeing abuse, those unable to afford to rent, or those who are evicted or asked to leave. And it's increasingly affected, really sadly, families with children, and around 40% of our city's homelessness population are children, mostly in families living in temporary accommodation. It's well documented. Outcomes for children in these nightly paid temporary and emergency accommodation are significantly worse than those in settled housing. And we have many system pressures, as Councillor Taylor has gone through. But I do want to tell people about the work that is underway, which we are working very hard. And there's an incredible amount of work with our housing teams to support people in crisis. And some of the things we're doing. So we've got a former office building being converted into modern women-only temporary accommodation opening this spring. We've got a direct award that's been agreed to convert high-cost nightly payment, which costs us a huge amount of money, into a contractual arrangement expected to save more than £1 million a year and improving stability and quality. And an interim scheme, we will use up to 80 empty council homes between January and May, a temporary accommodation, prioritising households with children and those with health and education needs. So our priority is to prevent homelessness, but where this isn't possible, we are there to support those people in need. And yes, it's costing us a huge amount of money. And yes, there is an overspend. It is absolutely necessary. And to take those steps is also necessary so that we can continue to help those in need in our city. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Taylor.
Chair, I just wanted to come in on one thing there, which is to say that and this is not having a pop at other areas, but in other areas of the country, we have to be honest, and indeed recommendations of certain bodies that look at local government, is that one solution to the pressures on temporary accommodation should be to send people to the other side of the country. I think Councillor Williams has been clear, Councillor Sankey has been clear, I've been clear. We're not doing that as an administration over our dead bodies. What we've got to do is fix the underlying issues. I think it's really important that we say that.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. I've got Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd like to say I don't recognise what Councillor Shanks said about a lack of change. If anything, I think myself and officers are struggling to keep up with the pace of change where it comes to children and young people. And that's our problem, and it's a good problem to have, and it's one I welcome. Saying nothing's changed, things are just the same, it makes no difference who you vote for, is absolute rubbish. The government are removing the 2-child limit. There's new investment coming in for young people and skills that we are receiving now. I literally just approved it by email just now to bring in money into the council. That's not an announcement. That's real pounds in our bank to spend on young people and getting people into work. That's change. That's good change. And I'm grateful. We've increased the hours of free childcare for families. And if a family takes the full amount that they're entitled to of all the new things that the Labour government have brought in, it's £7,500 a year better off. Given that nearly half the children in Whitehall live in poverty, this is real change from a Labour government with real Labour values. We've also increased access to free meals during the school day, both breakfast and lunch. And as a council, I'm most proud of our mental health investment. I met with the children and young people and teachers who supported the Citizens UK campaign to get that in place. And that's changed because the council listened. Since we've been in charge, young people get a greater voice and a greater say in the decisions that affect them. The previous council was green and wrung their hands and moaned and protested. We're the ones listening to children and young people. We're the ones delivering for them, and we're the ones delivering them a vote at 16. And I'm absolutely proud to say, yes, it's difficult. Some of my problems are good problems, trying to get this money out into communities and working. Those are great problems to have. But it's definitely changed. And we're a party that governs for the benefit of children and young people after a decade of absolute immoral neglect of children and young people in this country.
Thank you, Councillor Daniel. I couldn't agree more with Councillor Oaken.
Thanks, Chair. Well said, Councillor Daniel, and agree with the earlier comments. Councillor Taylor, excuse me, did a very good job of outlining some of the key things that are in the budget, and it's no surprise for you to hear that I completely agree that investing to fix the underlying issues is obviously the right way to go. So you talked about what's in the budget. I would just want to reference what's not in the budget, and what's not in the budget is major cuts to frontline services. Especially on look and feel and the basic things that we know our residents really care about. There's no reductions to the street cleansing service. There's no reductions to the graffiti team. There's no closure of public toilets. In fact, we're so used to refurbishing and reopening public toilets. We reopened one just a few weeks ago and we barely noticed because we're so used to doing it. The net zero team and our net zero work is also protected. Obviously, we're seeing other political parties around the country and indeed around the world dropping not only their commitments but their moral obligations faster than you can say, I don't know, Nigel Farage or whatever. And our net zero team obviously remains very much in place and driving things forward. And Councillor Shanks earlier is saying that we've made the city a worse place. And let's not forget that most of the toilets were shut when we took over in 2023. Let's not forget that there wasn't a plan to decarbonise. There wasn't even an evidence base to make a plan to decarbonise the city in 2023. So don't even get me started, because this will be a very, very long meeting if we go down that road. That doesn't mean that some savings are not possible. There are some savings in there, but the themes really, certainly in the sort of frontline services and the city operations and environmental services areas, are really sort of focused around I'd say kind of three main themes. There's some efficiency stuff in there. There's a lot of focus in this budget on innovation, which I think we can all agree is long overdue. And also a more commercial mindset. And there's already been some very good examples of that. We're moving towards setting up a commercial aspect to our graffiti removal service, and the sort of intention of that, aside from adopting a more collaborative approach with our businesses, whereas rather slapping fines on them, we're saying, hey, how about we'll remove this for you? And yes, there's a cost to that, but hopefully everyone's a winner. And also that has the potential, obviously, to bring in income to bolster the team and enable us to do more on graffiti removal going forward, therefore further improving the look of the city. Trade and garden waste is a really good example of where this has worked really well in the past. 3 years ago, the commercial bit of our collection service, which is trade waste and garden waste, was underspending every year. Fast forward to 3 years later, it's now making very, very, very significant income indeed that's then enabling more agility in that service, and we actually have got our eyes on the prize and think we can actually go much further on that. And on public toilets, like I say, we've just reopened a new one at the level. I actually haven't been down there to, normally I go and get a photo of me leaning nonchalantly against the door outside. I've not done that yet, but I will do soon. We've obviously prioritised refurbishing them, keeping them open, and it's one of the things that I'm most proud of as an administration because of the amount of people that rely on our public toilets. We're also looking at ways that we can extend the toilet opening hours, and that's hopefully something we'll be discussing going forward. So yeah, there's lots of good stuff in this budget in terms of investment, but there's also some very key things not in the budget, which are big cuts to frontline services that our residents care about.
Thanks, Councillor Akins. Councillor Alexander.
I wanted to talk about Wellington House, as that's a line in the budget, and I know a couple of colleagues around the table have been receiving a few emails about it. So Wellington House is a council-owned building that accommodates a day centre for adults with learning disabilities. The day centre supports 21 adults with learning disabilities and employs 21 support staff. It operates Monday to Friday, is closed at the weekends, and is open 51 weeks a year. Not all the people who attend Wellington House attend every day, and some attend just on an occasional basis. Over recent years, particularly since the COVID pandemic, attendance at the day centre has declined. And nowadays, most adults with learning disabilities are receiving their day support via the city's vibrant independent sector day service providers. This has significantly increased the unit costs of running the day service at Wellington House. There are 6 other providers of learning disability day services for adults in the city, with some services providing daycare for service users with low to moderate needs, and some catering for service users with moderate to high needs, including those needing one-to-one care. Of the 21 people who currently attend Wellington House, around 9 have complex needs. The other people who attend have low to moderate needs. Due to failing attendance and the high unit costs of running the service, Wellington House is no longer operating as an efficient, flexible, modern day centre that meets the needs of adults with learning disabilities in the city. The budget proposal, therefore, is to close Wellington House Day Centre and re-provide day services for those 21 people who currently attend, based on both the declining economic viability of the service and the confidence that we have in the independent sector day service providers to accommodate the needs of every individual. It is anticipated, in the event a decision is made to close Wellington House, that a saving of £400,000 can be achieved through recommissioning day support for those individuals within the city. Those savings can be then used to support other aspects of adult social care within our city, including assessments, reviews, prevention and reablement. Should full council agree the proposals on the 26th of February, there will be a full and formal consultation process on the proposal to close the service. This will include a full impact assessment to determine what the impacts may be from the closure of the service, should the decision be made for it to close. This will include an evaluation of the impact on those affected that attend the service, their families and carers, the services where people live, and the staff that work at Wellington House. Within the formal consultation process, each person who attends Wellington House will have an individual review of their care and support needs to determine what alternative day service would meet those needs. There will be a formal process to meet the families, the carers and other stakeholders to seek their views. Staff at Wellington House will also have individual one-to-one meetings to consider future employment options. We will continue our engagement with the independent sector market to ensure that there is market capacity to provide the right level of care to those people who currently attend Wellington House. The consultation would last 12 weeks, following which a report will return to Cabinet for the outcomes from the consultation to be fully considered and a decision made whether then to close Wellington House or not. The formulation of this budget proposal is for proposal only. It does not in itself mean that a decision to close the day centre has already been reached. That decision will be taken by Cabinet upon receipt of the full report and recommendations following the conclusion of the consultation. Any decision to close Wellington House will be made following the full consultation with service providers, their families and carers, and other service providers in the city, and only in the knowledge that every single service user can continue to have their needs met. And going forwards, the council will work with partners across the city on a plan to ensure that future service users will also have their needs met within the city in a person-centred, holistic and sustainable way.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Any more comments or questions, Councillor Wooten?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Colleagues, this Labour administration is making responsible, fair and balanced choices for the city's parking service. We have looked carefully at our parking review objectives and made careful choices within the context of our budget pressures, as eloquently set out by Councillor Taylor, to protect residents, support local workers and businesses, and keep parking simple, fair and balanced to meet the many needs of our city. Last year, we froze parking fees and charges across the city. This year, we're building on that responsible approach by focusing on fairness, clarity and protecting the people who keep Brighton Hove running. Our aim is to keep the costs down where we can. So daily charges in all council-owned barrier car parks, London Road, the Lanes, Regency Square and Trafalgar Street will be frozen for another 12 months, making 2 full years of no increase. Residents, traders and business permits rise only with corporate inflation 3%, with a review planned to look how to make more of these permits affordable. Season tickets increase modestly at 5%. No increases at all for permits for paid and unpaid carers, doctors, school staff and essential support workers. These are the people that keep our city moving. They shouldn't be priced out. This is why permits for schools, doctors and paid and unpaid carers are fully frozen. So making parking more flexible, we're introducing a new 6-hour tariff across most of car parks and our zones to bridge the gap between the current 4 hours and the 11-hour rates, giving residents and workers more flexibility and better value. And we're simplifying across the city. So introducing of a unified seafront tariff from Madeira Drive to King Alfred Leisure Centre, lower in the winter and more in the summer, reflecting seasonal pressures along the seafront. So that seasonal summer stroke winter pricing to reflect real demand patterns in that zone. And we're about fairness, transparency and living within our means. Where some zones move from medium to high demand classification, this reflects real pressures on limited curbside space and responding honestly to and in a balanced way. We've been especially careful around hospitals and employment areas. In 2023, the Green-led proposals would have pushed some paid parking in zones from low to high tariffs, with raises of up to 300%. We put a stop to their plans to triple and quadruple paid parking and committed to a proper citywide holistic parking review instead. We are listening. This is why we have focused to ensure that we are simplifying parking and have been careful to consider cumulative effects. This is why we have kept these paid on-street parking for low demand zones unchanged. I do recognise that this was erroneously presented in a summary table as initially published. This is now amended to emphasise our commitment to paid on-street parking in these zones, which will be kept as low demand zones, and the tariff reflects that accordingly, including around the hospital, which is very important to us. Our budget is about managing parking in a way that works for communities, not pricing cars out of the city. That's why residents expect that. That's what residents expect from the Labour administration, and that's what we are delivering. So how does parking income support our city? Well, parking income ensures effective enforcement, helping to keep traffic flowing and ensure safety and access. Surplus investment is in concessionary bus passes for older and disabled residents, bus routes that would not otherwise be commercially viable, transport schemes promoting safe, active and sustainable travel. The budget doesn't just manage parking, it supports a fair, inclusive and sustainable transport network. So in summary, the parking proposals within this budget include a 2 years of frozen barrier car park charges, targeted protection for workers who support our city, modest inflation-aligned increases elsewhere, a simpler, fairer system for residents, businesses and visitors, investment for surplus into the city's public transport, sustainable travel. This is a budget built on fairness, balance and responsibility, protects people during a challenging period, while simplifying parking across the city, fairer for a flourishing city, and investing in the transport services that keep Brighton and Hove moving. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mooting. Councillor Robbins.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to Councillor Taylor for his always a very clear and concise presentation. And during that presentation, I noticed that we talked. I mean, there were things that coming out of the opposition councillors, I didn't even understand what they were talking about. One of them said, it's like selling the telly to pay the rent. And I thought, well, of course you'd sell the telly to pay the rent. You look pretty stupid sitting on the pavement collecting the telly, wouldn't you? And saying, well, I didn't want to sell this, but I was quite happy to be thrown out of where I was living. But also, we mentioned about the continued investment in a lot of our sports facilities and our playgrounds and other things. And I wanted to highlight that because that falls really in my portfolio. And what I'd like to talk about, or not really talk about, but mention, is the CEO of Sport England who brought out a report which says health drives wealth. Gyms, pools and leisure centres play a big part in this. And he goes on to say how important the month of January is for leisure centres. It's consistently the busiest month of the year, not just because of New Year's resolutions, but beyond the first month of the year. There is a growing understanding that physical activity is prevention medicine and that healthy populations drive a healthy economy. And I think this is really important as we go on. Talk about a large footfall through the door in January, and there's people coming for health, of course, but also for confidence, connections and supports. So I think I'm really proud that we're continuing to invest in sport and leisure facilities, playgrounds and everything else. At a time when it would be easy to circle the wagons and just say, you know, there's no money to do anything. We'll shut up shop and get rid of cut this and cut that and do something else. So I think we're taking a sensible and pragmatic view of things, and I'm really proud that we're continuing to do what we do. Thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Councillor Robbins. Any other comments or questions or reflections from Cabinet? No, in which case I'm going to hand over to Liz.
Yeah, I just want to formally move the officer amendment, which Councillor Mooton alluded to. It's just to be really clear, there is an officer amendment that has arisen through a typographical error in the original papers. It's been published in Addendum 2, so that's there for everyone, all Cabinet members to see. Charles is just going to quickly describe that, as it's important that before you vote, that you're clear that you're voting based on this Addendum 2 amendment to Appendix 3 of the papers. Thank you.
Thank you. Under Addendum 2, in Appendix 3, fees and charges under page 113, there was incorrect, as Trevor has outlined, 5 lines where the low tariff should have been, the medium tariff should have been low tariff. So effectively zones C, H, J and N should have been low tariff rather than medium. And effectively that just affects those 5 lines, which is 1 hour, 2 hour, 4 hour, 6 hour and 11 hour. And that's been correctly outlined in Addendum 2.
Thanks very much, Charles. Are Cabinet happy to accept the proposed amendment? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. In which case, are Cabinet happy to agree the recommendations in this report? Agreed. Thank you. Our next report today is on our budget and capital investment in our housing revenue account programme 26-27 and our medium-term financial strategy. And I'm going to ask Councillor Williams to introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. So the housing revenue account is a ring-fence budget that contains the income and expenditure that covers the council's social landlord duties in relation to the 12,320 rented homes, 2,716 leasehold homes and 3,000 car park units. In settling the budget for next year, we really want to invest in our housing stock. We want to carry on doing this in our housing stock, in our estates and in our residents. So in line with the council plan and the housing strategy priorities, the HRA budget proposals for 26-27 support significant investment in improving housing quality, increasing, importantly, housing supply and improving services for tenants. The 26-27 total revenue expenditure budget includes capital financing costs to be approved is 86.7 million, whilst the revenue income is 86.7 million, providing a very precarious but even break-even position. Just. So the next part, as set out in the report, average social rents, I do want to point out, in Brighton and Hove, remain comparatively low in the England and South East average. In fact, we're amongst the lowest, I do believe, in England, which we can be very proud of. So to support the increased investment in council housing, a rent increase of 4.8% is proposed. This is in line with the government's rent setting policy and is required and is essential to ensure the HRA remains in balance. Now, this equates to an average increase to a council social rent of £5.15 a week and to an average weekly social rent of £112.16. 93%, which I'm very proud to say, of our homes are let on social rent. Social rents are the best rent, and we want more of those. Now, for the HRA deficit in the medium term cost pressures, and we want to avoid deficit. Historically, rent restrictions and increasing compliance requirements have and continue to put a financial pressure on the HRA, and we have to avoid that projected deficit from 26-27 onwards. This is an increasingly common picture among local authorities and the HRAs. So given our comparatively low rents and the budget pressures and investment proposals, we are seeking to the approval of a 5% increase for new build and newly re-let homes only. So those that are already in the homes on a rent, they won't get as much of an increase. Now, with an average of 550 new lets per year, this is projected to generate 208,000 next year and approximately 3 million over 10 years, including the annual rent uplifts. Now, delivering additional council housing, which is one of my favourite things to do, remains a key investment priority for the council, with budget proposals for 26 and 27, including investment of 72 million in new housing supply. The council takes a blended approach to delivery, ensuring that new supply is provided through new build, through acquisitions, including our very successful home purchase policy, and through our hidden homes and small sites programmes. The budget forecast includes a further 496 homes over the 5-year period in total, and this is in addition to the 933 homes that we've been delivering since 2019 up to March 26, and we anticipate the above target delivery of 140 additional council homes in 25-26 period. The 2026-27 budget also proposes investments in the council services to our tenants and our existing housing stock. And we have all heard how important it is to improve the quality of the homes that our residents live in. And we've heard of the problems in the past of the lack of investment in our council homes. And we are now having to deal with that, and we are dealing with it head on. So our service investments include an additional 681,000 for our repairs and maintenance, for additional staff to deal with damp and mould in our tenants' homes. We don't want anyone to be living in damp and mould, and we set up a specialist team, a forward thinking for AWOB's law compliance to deal with that, voids, disrepair, legal pressures, etc. And 1.205 million for a housing investment and asset management service to support our stock condition survey and funding for building safety requirements. 605,000 for tenancy services to increase the fire safety resources, which is extremely important, and fund our alternative right to buy pilot for tenants of our LPS blocks. So our proposed capital programme is to improve the quality of our existing homes, and this is really important. And this reflects the delivery of planned maintenance, improvement programmes, and major capital projects. So I do hope that you consider this very carefully and approve our recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Williams. Councillor Taylor.
Thanks, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Williams, for that. It was really helpful and really clear. And also thank you to officers, some of who are in the room, Jeanette and Martin, for all their work on this. It's something to be proud of, really, in that we have a really severe housing crisis that we discussed, but we also do have, very large stock in the city of social housing that Jill has talked about, and we should be proud that the rents have been kept genuinely low and affordable, and we should be proud that we're trying to invest to build more housing, because if we expand that stock of social housing, it will take time, but it will start to fix the underlying market and affordability in the city. We've got to build new and preferably build new social rent, as Councillor Williams says. I think just one other point I wanted to make is really a point to government, which is to say that the government have very strong ambitions on affordable housing. They've made a very large amount of money available, 39 billion over 10 years. But I think there is something about really focusing on councils as one of the proper delivery mechanism for affordable housing, because we know that house builders in the sector, including registered providers, but other developers who are just developing and then may have a affordable element, in many ways they're struggling. They're struggling to bring forward schemes, and they're struggling with viability, they're struggling with remediation of existing issues. And I just think as a country, we've got to actually make a total step change and basically reverse the disastrous policy of 40 years. We moved away from social housing. We've got to bolster councils and their balance sheets so councils can take more. We call it risk, but it isn't really risk, because yes, you've got to invest money up front, but really what you're doing is you're investing in the sustainability of your cities and your places and the affordability of your cities and your places. So I think, government really should be trying to focus on how do we get councils as the main delivery mechanism for new building and affordable building. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Taylor. Councillor Okins.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Williams, for introducing that report. Yeah, it's easy for people to forget that as a council, we're a democratically elected body. We're a big organisation. We deliver 700 odd services, but we're also a massive landlord. And obviously within that comes an expectation, quite rightly so, and a responsibility that we provide good quality homes, and, you know, homes that are nice to live in and that are cheap to run and affordable and all of that. And obviously, you know, little things like the repairs backlog, which I think, you know, we've discussed in this chamber before, you know, over the last 2.5, 3 years have gone from 9,000+ outstanding repairs down to about 2,000 last time we looked, but still obviously trying to drive that down to zero. And you know, when I think about the quality of a home, and speaking of someone that lives in a very cold house in the sort of private sector, as it were, you know, how warm it is and how nice it is to be there and how cheap it is to run is obviously crucially important. We have the warm homes plan now from the government, and we also have the local power plan, which I'll come back to in a sec. But I just want to sort of draw out a couple of the sort of key aspects of this within the HRA capital programme. So in the private sector, private rental sector and the privately owned sector in the city, only 28% of those homes have an EPC rating of C or above. Contrast that with our own council housing stock. That's 88% of our council housing stock is EPC C or above. Now, we want that to get to 100%. And of course, you could argue that it's better to be at EPC B or A, which is obviously even better. But, you know, it's so important that we continue to invest in the stock to make this, to make our homes nice places to live in. And, you know, while I'm on the subject, obviously energy efficiency happens to reduce carbon emissions as well, and so does sticking solar panels on the roof. We started a concerted programme of solar PV installation on our council housing in 2024, early 2024, and since then we've completed more than 850 installations of solar panels on the rooftops of our council housing. And at the moment we're installing between 6 and 8 new systems every single week. And this capital programme allocates a further £30 million over the next 5 years for more sustainability measures. And the Warm Homes Plan and the Local Power Plan are obviously sort of big central government missions which seek to not only drive down emissions but to improve the lives of residents. And they, both of those plans, put local authorities and councils and indeed communities at the heart of delivering them. So it gives us a real opportunity, I think, to sort of do the opposite of what Councillor Shanks was talking about earlier, which is to use the Labour government and the Labour Council to work in lockstep to deliver very, very tangible and very, very keenly felt improvements to the lives of our residents.
Thanks, Councillor Akins. Any other comments? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I would just like to say thank you to Councillor Williams and officers for managing to still have a balanced budget, bearing in mind the amount of money that's had to been spent in recent years on the health and safety issues, on AWAB's law that's just come in. We've brought down the, as Councillor Wilkins mentioned, we brought down the backlog of housing repairs and still managed to have a balanced budget. Are you magicians or something? Well done.
Thanks, Councillor Robinson. Questions or comments from Cabinet? Councillor Williams.
Just a quick one. I'm not the magician. I think Paris is the magician, and we want to thank her formally. Thank you so much, because I can't add up. You know I can't. So you've helped me out.
Thank you, colleagues. In which case, is Cabinet happy to approve the recommendations in the report? Thank you, colleagues. We will move on now to our next substantive report for this afternoon, which is TBM 9, our Targeted Budget Management Report for month 9 of this financial year. I'm going to ask Councillor Taylor to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. And I think it could be relatively brief on this one, some of it which I touched on in the overall budget presentation, but I did just want to talk about TBM, but also financial sustainability and the medium-term financial strategy of the council. In terms of TBM, this report shows TBM 9, and if we go to page 471 in the document and paragraph 4.3, you can see the graph that tracks TBM. There has been a material reduction in TBM from month 8 to month 9, where our forecast risk has come down significantly, and it's come down to 4.8 million overall, which still represents clearly a risk position for the council in terms of the in-year position, but it's down, significantly versus month 8, where it was over £9 million. There's a couple of things that have driven that, including some one-off things where we've looked at ring-fence reserves and whether those are required, looked at capital programme, but also released the risk reserve that we put aside at the beginning of the year, which of course it's easy for opposition to council to say, why are you putting a ring-fenced risk provision in place? Well, we're doing that because we know that budgets are difficult to manage in year when you have large savings packages. And so that was clearly a prudent thing to do, and releasing that at TBM 9 is the right thing to do. We've still got some way to go, but as the report identifies, there is a possible further capitalisation of up to £3.2 million of revenue that will get us closer to a balanced position at year end. I also just want to talk about financial sustainability, which is to remind colleagues that unfortunately when we got into the council, we inherited a position where the general reserve of the council, the working balance, was below £6 million. It was meant to be at £9 million, but the previous administration overspent and brought that below £6 million. That is a startlingly low figure for a working balance if you compare it to other local authorities in the country, either similar sized ones or indeed smaller ones. The gross budget of the council across many things, of which many are ring fenced, is nearly £1 billion, and the net general fund that we're talking about this year of £340 million. To think that you've only got cash in the bank of £6 million is a very, very low reserves position to inherit from the previous administration. So we've been paying that back, and we've paid back a number of amounts to that. In this report, we say that we're not going to pay back another amount just yet. But that, of course, links back to EFS, which is we have applied for. And part of that exceptional financial support will enable us to build up our overall reserves and our overall sustainability. All of that comes within the MTFS, which is to say that now that we have longer term settlements from government, we need to be setting balanced budgets over the medium term. Now, that it can be tricky if our pressures fluctuate a lot, and they have done this year. But what we have set out in the previous report is a clear approach to how we will balance each year over the medium term. Some of that will need to be fleshed out in individual budgets, but we have set out a route map to be able to balance our budgets and get to a more sustainable position, much of which is about, as I've said in the previous report, fixing underlying issues and underlying pressures, but it's also about innovation, it's also about digital. And I did disagree somewhat with what Councillor Shanks said, is digital is all about moving residents further away from the council, and that's a very strange way to think about it. Often digital will be about totally behind the scenes, being able to do things quicker and more efficiently. It also means the current digital that we have, including websites and other portals, just working better. If they work more efficiently and better, it will save the council money, but it will also provide a better service to residents. And this is not about taking residents away from the council. It's about saying, can we become more efficient? Can we become a better customer and client and resident facing council, and that's the kind of innovation that we'll need over the medium term to get us into a more sustainable place. And that's obviously a key part of demonstrating to government that this EFS indeed is exceptional. It is about an exceptional financial circumstance, which is the pressure on homelessness and temporary accommodation. I'll leave it there, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Oaken.
Yeah, and just briefly, just wanted to loop back to the quip that was made earlier about selling the TV to pay the rent. I think a more appropriate way to describe it would be selling the TV to buy the house so that you no longer have to pay the rent.
Wonderful. Any other comments or questions on TPM 9? It's obviously positive to see movement in the direction that we're going. And again, huge thanks to officers across the organisation for managing what was clearly a tight budget that we set last February for this financial year, and which we've been battling to meet. If there are no further questions or comments, then do colleagues approve the recommendations? Excellent. I'll take one more report and then I suggest we have a little comfort break, but let's turn to our next substantive report for this afternoon, which is a report from Councillor Trevor Newton, and it is on our transport and capital maintenance programme for the next year.
Thank you, Chair. Today I bring good news, and to build on the work of this administration is doing to make our roads smoother, our paths straighter and our streets better for residents. But before the good news, may I first talk about failure. A pothole is not just a hole in the road. It's a visible sign of a road that has not been maintained as it should, a symptom requiring a temporary patch rather than the long-term investment that should have been preventing the problem in the first place. The Tory pothole, the emblem of the Tory policies of underinvestment, underfunding and neglect for year upon year, not just in our city, but at local authorities across England. Now, some people have actually got in touch with me and asked me not to refer to it as that, saying stop blaming the Tories for this. But I think, very importantly, you've got to understand the root cause of a problem before you solve it. And the irony of is impossible to ignore when a Tory points at a Tory pothole born from the very same party of neglect whose approach to maintenance allowed them to spread in the first place. Years of underinvestment and neglect have left councils across England, including ours, with a backlog that's neither quick nor cheap to undo. Quick to the point again, quick to point again, as they are, to another repair within days of a report, thanks to this Labour administration's refreshed policy. We're getting on repairing them. We are a listening administration. We know residents want action, not excuses, and tackling this backlog is our priority to get on and fix our roads. As with last year, we have refreshed our highways infrastructure asset management policy and strategy, which I brought to Cabinet last April. When residents report defects, such as a poll using our online tool, please report to the council, or when our inspectors identify them through routine assessments, each pothole or defect is given a risk-based score to inform our response as required. And that's a 2-hour response for safety critical to the most urgent, high-risk safety defects. We will get out there and make them safe. A 24-hour response for Category 1, the serious safety risks. A 7-day response for Category 2, moderate risk defects. The 28 days for Category 3 lower risk defects, with a very low risk Category 4 going into our planned approach. So we are coming to a pothole near you. With more, we will do more. This financial year's uplift in grant funding from the new Labour government marks a significant turning point. I'm very pleased to report that we now have a multi-year commitment to invest in our city's roads and pavements. Building on this financial year's £8.366 million local transport grant and maintenance block allocation, from this coming April, we will have £8.8 million, rising to £9.81 million the following year, £10.636 million the year after that, and then £13.13 million in the subsequent year. That's a 4-year commitment to this city, increasing each year, which is absolutely welcomed and absolutely needed. So I'm genuinely very excited by the commitment for us, by this commitment to our city. This is real sustained investment, the kind that finally allows us to tackle long-standing issues, not just chase emergencies. When we said in 2023 we would restore the basics, this is what we meant. And in 2025, investment has delivered results. We took a firm grip of our programmes, resurfacing and treating many more roads across our city. Sections of Shoreham, Portland, Manor, London, Preston, Ditchling, Sackfield, Hangleton, Marlow, Oakdean, Valley, Drove, Claremont Station, Aberdeen, Arundel, Union, Terminus, Buckingham, Dyke and Viaduct roads. Preston Drove, Marine Drive, Valley Gardens, Dyke Road Avenue, Shirley Drive, Woodland Drive, Close and Avenue, and many others have all seen improvements. The same is true across neighbourhood streets, from Lovers Walk, Chiddingly Close, Upper Chalvington and Warburton Close, to Barnfield Gardens to College Terrace, and dozens more. This is a visible result of a council that puts maintenance first. Consistent with this approach, we set out our Highways Reactive Safety Maintenance and Inspection Policy as updated with this Cabinet paper. Our objective safety assessment of each highways according to network hierarchy means that each road is inspected monthly, 3 monthly, 6 monthly or annually. Every road in the city is looked at. So we're absolutely on top of this as well with our refreshed policy. With this, we plan to resurface, treat and patch all or part of many roads in 2026-27, including Upper Rock Gardens, Elm Grove, Weston, Lewis, Marlow, Craven, Trafalgar, Victoria, Lewis, Stapley, Old Shoreham, Church, Montpellier, Silwood, St George's, Queens, Bernard, South Downs, Warren, Matlock, Tivoli and Fonthill Roads, Hangleton, Hardwick, Cuckmere, Kingsway and Ridgeways and Draxmont Ways, including Varndine, Holt and Mulberry Close, Coleman, Exeter, Hampton, South, Boyces, Silwood and Foundry Streets, including Preston Buildings, Weston, Clifton Hill, Denmark, Rose Hill and Richmond Terraces, Russell Square, Queen's Gardens, Florence Oriental and Oxford Places, Station Approach in Hove, Mackey, Carden, Braybourne, Dyke Road and Withdean Avenues, Preston Drove in Five Ways and Chalfont Drive, Ash Close and more. Which reminds me, it's absolutely our duty, and residents expect us to do it. Unlike the Green Party, who seek to belittle those wearing high vis, proud of what they do, whilst the Tories continue to point at things they do not do, we are a party of Labour who get things done. So let me say this clearly: I'm not ashamed to put on my hard hat and my high vis. And I'm proud to stand with the workers who deliver, the contractors, the engineers and the officers who work day and night to keep this city moving. Their work matters. It's skilled, essential and deserving of respect. Last year, we listened to our residents through the City Transport Plan 2035 consultation. The message was clear. People want well-maintained, safe, accessible streets and pavements, alongside better active travel choices and continued improvements in public transport. Our capital programme reflects these priorities for a better Brighton and Hove and the city to be proud of. So in summary, our £8.8 million capital programme for 2026-27 includes £600,000 for improved safety, including school streets and safer, better streets, £200,000 for improved accessibility from drop curves, removing tree stumps and replanting public rights of way, £1.4 million for active and inclusive travel, with additional investments in bike hire and cycle parking. With no additional funding sought for major transport schemes already approved, including Valley Gardens Phase 3, which remains on time and on budget. £400,000 to improve the look and feel of the city, including city centre renewal and pothole prevention. Nearly £4 million for carriageways, as I've listed. £820,000 for footways. 350,000 for drainage signals and street lighting, and 300,000 for structures and bridges, with additional 3.3 million from a local authority bus grant and 0.9 million funding from by Active Travel England, and additional council funding to tackle the backlog means we plan to invest as much as 18.9 million in our city roads this coming financial year. So before I close, I want to highlight one key priority to this administration, and that is pavements. We're committing £1 million to improve our pavements and to make accessible, safe and well lit. This is essential to making our streets walkable, inclusive and welcoming to all. Chair, Cabinet colleagues, I commend this paper to you to agree the total capital funding of 8.8 million, made up of 3.326 million for local transport grant and 5.475 million for maintenance block. We are delivering on our promises for long-term investment so residents expect to keep our city moving. With more, we are doing more, making paths straight, rough roads smooth, streets safer, better accessible to all. And we're coming to fix a pothole near you. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Councillor Newton. Never to be seen without his high vis. Councillor Taylor.
Well, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Newton. I mean, you were reciting so many streets there at one point that I thought you were doing the knowledge and perhaps training to be a taxi driver in the city. And, you know, perhaps, it was in such flow there at one point that I think perhaps we could release that as a spoken word track and make some further money for the city to fill some more potholes. He's absolutely right that these are Tory potholes, but as he says, we're lucky because we have one of the top Tory pothole spotters in the country, which is Councillor Ivan Lyons, who's always popping up on Facebook to spot one of the potholes that his party created. But it's pretty simple because the Tories created the potholes, Ivan's spotting them, and we're filling them. And that's what this report does, and that's what we're doing in the city. I absolutely commend it. This impacts right across the city. Everyone cares about it. We've got to sort these roads out. As I said before, at one point, somebody said to me, God, you're filling so many potholes and fixing so many roads, it's causing a nightmare in the city. But we've got to do it. And I really commend the work that Councillor Newton is doing. And I commend him putting on his high-vis jacket to go and visit the sites, because he should be visiting the sites. He should be speaking to our workers and our contractors, understanding the nature of the work and also promoting it to the city. So I thought it was very pity that the Greens took the mick out of that, and quite right that he wears one today. Thank you for the work, thank you to officers, and thank you from the city that we are keep going on repairing our roads and sorting out our city infrastructure.
Hear, hear, excellent work, Councillor Newton, and to officers, really pleased to see this programme coming forward. Councillor Oakins.
Yes, agreed. Very well said, Trevor and everybody. Sorry, Councillor Newton, I always forget in this chamber. Yeah, it's I don't drive that much, but a few times in the last, I don't know, since Christmas, New Year, I've driven from one side of the city to the other, or come into the city from being up north, and there's clearly plenty left to do, and obviously some potholes have popped up since the New Year period, as you would expect at this time of year, with the weather being what it is, and you know, freeze and thaw events and so on, obviously doing what they do. But I'm certainly starting to detect a very noticeable change in the city, which is that suddenly lots of our main routes of access across the city, those kind of key roads, are resurfaced and gloriously smooth now. And I think it is getting to the point where people are really starting to notice that difference. There is still plenty more to do, which is why it's so good to see that this is not just a sort of blast of money, but it's a concerted long-term programme of continued investment. And it's unusual for us to sit and look at a table of sums that get progressively larger by progressively larger amounts each year, unless you're looking at, you know, the inflationary pressures of temporary accommodation or adult social care or something. But it's quite remarkable that the grant funding going into road maintenance, yes, going up each year, but going up by a larger amount each year. And I think he said it's 8.3 million to 8.8 to 9.8 to 10.6 to 13 0.1, and that's what is that? That's £500,000 increase this year, £1 million increase the following year, 2 million the following year, 3 million the following year. So obviously that's great. I just I suppose the question really, which is what has unlocked that kind of very sizable investment, but that sort of really concerted investment over a period of time that grows and grows, because it is obviously the decades and decades of neglect. It takes a programme exactly like this to get on top of it.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor Rokins, for your question. I think it's absolutely quite striking. Sometimes you get formulas and settlements which are flatlining almost, but this actually demonstrates the need and the growing need, because with time these roads get worse, and that's why you've got to tackle it. And the real problem of underinvestment over well over a decade under the previous government is actually the backlog has got very much bigger. And I think the Labour government have recognised this. Last year they put £1.6 billion in. That's increasing with it, because across the country, this decline has been brought up by local authorities nearly everywhere. And the motorists and cyclists are just finding it really difficult to navigate the roads, because it's just a problem. And as time goes on, things get, we have to tackle this backlog. So I think the numbers, as you describe, are because you've got a Labour government that's committed to this, and as a local authority, Brighton and Hove City Council, we're committed to deliver. We're receiving those funds, and we're stepping up our programme to make sure we're geared up to meet that increasing resource. So we're very much welcome it. We do have a big backlog. We're absolutely making that difference, and I agree. A number of residents have got in touch and saying, actually, we noticed what you're doing, and we're very pleased that's happening.
Thank you, Councillor Mooton. Councillor Robbins.
Yeah, I'll just be quick, and thanks ever so much, Trevor, for again, Councillor Mooton. Sorry, I live in an area of the city where it butts up against the next authority, and I do notice a difference where the city ends, and I think it's West Sussex take over. But just before we go for our break, could you run through that list of because I'm not sure I heard my road in there, and I would just like to make sure.
I was looking for your road, Councillor Robbins. I was looking for Memory Lane in Portslade, but I just couldn't find it.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Mooton. And yeah, we're going to package up that spoken word hip hop riff of roads in Brighton and Hove that are getting resurfaced, and we will be making that available. Councillor Robinson, did you want to come in? Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly. So thank you, Councillor Mooton, for your presentation. Absolutely fantastic. And I'm pleased to read in the Better Safer Streets section of this the prioritisation. I see, for example, that Clarendon Road and Goldstone Villas is set looking at that junction is set at a priority 3. You and I know we need to have some conversations about how to improve that with the advent of the 3X coming along. But pedestrian crossings, how many will be installed in 26-27? Thank you.
Well, through the chair, thank you, Councillor Robinson. I really appreciate that. And I think you've picked up on one of the lines, a throwaway comment almost in my summary, and that's the one of Safer, Better Streets. And it's really vital. Communities and residents know this is such an important programme. So the capital programme allocates funding for the Safer, Better Streets programme. This programme focuses on funding direct to achieve road safety improvements using a tried and tested prioritisation framework. It's fantastic to see the programme has delivered 18 priority improvement schemes this year alone, and the updated priority list includes another 10 key locations for pedestrian improvements planned, including Elm Grove and on Freshfield Road at junction between Queen's Park Terrace and Cuthbert Road, Lewis Road opposite Bates Estate, Dyke Road at the Droveway, and speed control measures on Warren Road and Whittingdean and at the bend of the Sheepcote Valley car park, for example. The report commends that the Council agrees this programme and to include the 26-27 Safer Better Streets as set out in Appendix 3, which will enable officers to progress this design and deliver these much needed safety improvements. And may I encourage residents to help us identify roads, streets and pathways of known concern to them. We have a due process with our Safer Better Streets to assess reported concerns and add these where the highways risk assessment deems appropriate to the Safer Better Streets programme. In this context, even this week, through Ward Councillor Fowler, I've been made aware of that Hollydene residents are concerned about the safety of the Hollingbury Road and Hollingbury Crescent Junction. I'm pleased to say and announce here that this has now been added to the Safer Better Streets programme list, which we will deliver on a citywide priority basis in due course. In terms of the junction of Clarendon Road and Goldstone Villas, which this has been a bus route for a number of years, but it has been highlighted more recently by the route of the 3X. I know this is something that Councillor Robinson and I've discussed. We know residents, it's very important to residents. So our sites are continually reviewed and changed and for changes to travel. And this is an ongoing review which will consider new bus routes such as the 3X across this particular junction. At this stage, it would be unsure if this change increases the score further, but this will be considered appropriately. So we absolutely will look at that again, make sure it fits in our programme, and it's very much in the list, and it's something we want to focus in on how we make it safer for the residents locally. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ayton. And yeah, in particular, the additional funding that we're going to put towards pavement repair, I think is going to be so welcome to residents across the city. Thanks, colleagues. Is everybody happy to support the recommendations in this report? Agreed. Thanks very much. Let's have a comfort break and come back for 4 o'clock, please, for the remaining reports. Welcome back. We will be resuming our cabinet meeting now. And our next item is the highly exciting A259 Seafront Highway Structures Phases 4 and 5 report. And we have Trevor Mooton back in the hot seat.
Thank you, Chair. Today I'm bringing genuinely great news for our city. Major investment to secure and strengthen our seafront for the next century. Phases 1, 2 and 3 of the A259 Kings Road Arches project are now already complete. Now we're recommending that works continue with phase 4 from the bandstand to the I-360 and phase 5 west of Shelter Hall. These arches don't just sit under the road, they hold it up. Completing these phases will keep the A259 and Upper Promenade safe and usable for the next 100 years and create an improved spaces for local businesses. We've been successful in securing over £22 million from the Department for Transport, with the council contributing £3.9 million, including £1.8 million in borrowing. This is a major win for the city. Why is this essential? Victorian arches beneath King's Road are failing. Built when horse-drawn carriages and promenading was the norm, these were never designed for modern pressures, now daily averaging 25,000 motor vehicles and 2,100 cyclists and thousands of pedestrians. Surveys show that they now urgently need replacing to avoid potential catastrophic collapse. Previous reconstruction west of the I-360 in 2014 and east in 2015 and Shelter Hall, refurbished in 2021, has already transformed the seafront. These new phases continue that success, a vital road reconstruction project that will secure our raised seafront road, cycle route and upper promenade whilst revitalising this part of the seafront for a vibrant future. We have the funding and with the approval today, we will get on and fix it. Of course, major structural work means some temporary disruption. There will be roadworks. The work is planned to begin in spring this year. We will work closely with the contractors to minimise impact, maintain traffic movement, ensure the A259 road, walking and cycling routes remain open, safe and accessible throughout. The major project brings tremendous opportunity. Not only will we see our road and prom as safe for many decades to come, but with it, this project brings much promise for a better, more vibrant seafront. Alongside reconstruction, the project creates the chance to reshape the seafront for decades ahead. As part of the A259 active travel strategy, as I brought to this cabinet in November, we plan to redesign the cycle route to match the high standards we've now set to the west, using space better, delivering a dedicated LTN 120 bi-directional cycle route where we can, and separating pedestrians, increasing parking and removing the wands in the road that we have at the moment. Design matters. We're also working closely with the businesses present in the arches. Every one of them matters, and officers are supporting them as plans progress. The rebuild will create new, larger, more usable commercial spaces beneath the road, replacing the constrained Victorian arches with modern, flexible units that will help business actively flourish and support vibrant seafront economy. The heritage features along the seafront, many of which are severely decayed, corroded or damaged, will be carefully kept, restored and replaced. We have presented to and discussed with our partners, including presenting these plans to the Transport and Travel Partnership with helpful feedback. We will continue to ensure good engagement with our partners throughout this work, including regular updates to stakeholders, partners and local residents. This does mean the closure of a much-loved paddling pool. Despite budget pressures, last summer we found money to keep it open because we know its value to families, but now it needs significant investment even to operate for a single further season. The water treatment plant and pipework and pumps are housed within 2 arches that must be dismantled for the construction to proceed. And this area in front of it will be used by the contractor as a compound, plant storage, and access to the working areas. We know this will disappoint many, and we apologise. We apologise. But again, this creates opportunity. We intend to explore options for a new play area with community engagement at the heart of this process. Today, we're asking Cabinet for permission to begin a feasibility study working together across Transport, Parks and Leisure and the Seafront Office and the property teams to deliver an excellent outcome to replace the play area and paddling pool that works for the future. So phases 1 to 3 brought us new shops, toilets and shelter hall. Phases 4 and 5 will complete years of work to deliver a safer road, a better cycle route, an improved promenade, new commercial spaces and rebuilt arches, and foundations for a new play area and paddling pool. This is a once-in-a-generation transformation of our seafront for residents, for businesses and visitors, and for the generations to come. And I commend this paper to you as Cabinet, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Mooton. A really exciting paper. Comments or questions from colleagues? Is everyone happy to approve the recommendations? Approved. Excellent. Thank you. That brings us to your next item, Councillor Mooton, which is the lane rental scheme.
So thank you, Chair. And before presenting the lane rental proposal, a brief recap of our streetworks permit scheme, if I may. Since its introduction in 2015, the scheme has improved coordination of utility companies and council works, reducing disruption compared with the previous notification-only system. They would just tell us they were doing some work on the road without any coordination. It operates under national legislation with around 20,000 permit applications proceeded each year through our DFT Street Manager system, including over 3,400 emergency works. We apply conditions to minimise impacts and overruns attract Section 74 charges, with Southern Water the most frequent offender. Penalties for working without a penalty or breaching conditions have recently doubled. However, the current framework has limits. Emergency works can start immediately. Fines are capped and have limited deterrent effect. Companies have no legal duty to consult residents, and quality varies. Our inspectors found 6,787 reinstatements last year, with 68 failing requiring correction. So what is the opportunity ahead? The proposal today is introduction of a lane rental scheme. Looking forward, we see real potential in adopting a lane rental scheme. In line with our priorities in our City Council plan to keep our city moving and to minimise disruption, this report brings forward an exciting new proposal to apply charges for carrying out works on the network during the busiest periods, incentivising our partners across utility and other companies to carry out works as quickly as possible. Our permit scheme must be cost neutral and brings in around £800,000 a year presently, but it lacks the financial levers needed to incentivise quicker, less disruptive work. So the lane rental changes that dynamic. Right now, the maximum fine for breaking permit conditions is £240 in total, not enough to influence how long works actually take. Lane rental will change that calculus. on the busiest roads at peak hours, utilities would pay up to £2,500 per day, a real incentive to plan better, work faster, and coordinate with others. Revenue would be reinvested in our city transport. With focused changes on the busiest 10% of the network and at peak times, keeping the city moving when it matters most. And we know it works. Where lane rental already operates, such as East Sussex, West Sussex, Kent and London, works finish significantly faster. Emergency works here in those areas average around 20. Emergency works in our city average around 20 days. In lane rental areas, they average between 2 to 5 days. You can see the contrast. So other benefits include and forward planning, improved quality of reinstatements, more off-peak working to reduce impacts on the travelling public, encouragement of innovative construction methods, so work together with others, and the ability to generate surplus revenue to invest in our transport infrastructure. And that we anticipate having a board, all the utility companies and the council with a dedicated officer able to inspect within this lane rental scheme. So in closing, and the ask to Cabinet today, while our current permit scheme has delivered major improvements to the management of street works, it also has clear limitations, particularly around the ability to influence behaviour, and that's limited. So residents deserve fewer delays and quicker, better planned works. I know how frustrating it can be for people travelling around the city to get stuck in traffic caused by roadworks. Utility companies play an important role in maintaining and improving our infrastructure, but it's vital they finish their work promptly, remove the roadworks and keep the city moving. A lane rental scheme would incentivise anyone who wants to carry out work on our roads to do so quickly and at times when it's will minimise disruption to residents. I'm very keen that the Cabinet supports our application to the Secretary of State for a lane rental scheme for Brighton and Hove, so we can cut disruption, drive better practice, and reinvest in our network for residents, businesses, and everyone who travels through our city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mootin. Comments or questions from colleagues on the lane rental scheme? Councillor Okins.
Thanks, Councillor Newton. Very good. I think we can all imagine a world in which, some of our big roadwork schemes are taking up to 20 days to be completed. If we could get that down to two to 3 days, that would be a bit of a game changer in terms of congestion and so on. Interesting to look at the precedents set for this in Kent and I think London, and you mentioned East and West Sussex as well. I presume this is not uncommon elsewhere. Obviously, we can look at data on how long works tend to take here versus those areas that have it. Is there any benchmarking data that's been looked at that looks at those areas that have it compared to what it was like before they introduced it, to sort of get a flavour for what that change looked like?
Well, through the chair, thank you, Councillor Okins. Very much in terms of the duration of the works, you're absolutely right. We've got a lot of data around this, and I can perhaps give you that more analytical response to that through consultation with officers. But broadly, we know the example from an average of 20 days for our emergency work to between 2 and 5 days is a big contrast. But I think the striking thing about this is actually the utilities start working together. So if a gas, a water, and electricity and a cable company realised they could do work on the same road, they're already talking, so on a board or panel together, and they can look at their planned programmes and say, look, why don't we do this together, save our lane rental costs? And that's happening elsewhere, and that's exactly the type of thing. So I think it's been a sort of a common myth that or comment that people say, why can't they just do them all together rather than come back a few weeks later and road to close again? Well, this is possible, and this is what we can drive. So as an authority, we'll be part of that board, we'll be part of that coordination, and they say, look, you've got these planned programmes, can we work them together to minimise disruption? So I can certainly get some data on that, but it's absolutely working in many local authorities where that type of activity happens, because actually it can save these utility companies money.
Thanks very much, Councillor Okins, Councillor Meaton. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Williams.
Thank you, and I want to thank you on behalf of the residents of Easton Road, as I am one of them, and we have continual disruption with various utility companies that seem to be never ending, so we thank you in advance.
Councillor Meaton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Williams. I'm aware that some roads are being dug up all too frequently. I've got my deep concerns that some of our utilities have not maintained their assets under our roads as they should, and too often they're causing us problems. There are bursts, there's collapses, etc. And I'd much prefer the utility company to get ahead of their planned programmes and to maintain their assets, and they don't have to come and do emergency works because they suddenly failed. And I think Eastern Roads is a good example where actually, if those assets were not so broken or vulnerable to damage, we may not have so frequent times when utilities are rocking up and digging the road again. It's not great for the surface as well. And the other thing about lane rental, we'll have an officer checking and supervising the utilities and their contractors to make sure the finishes fits well. We don't end up with ruts in the road and causing problems in the future.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody. I'm incredibly supportive of us taking this forward. I know that in councils that have already adopted this policy, as you say, Trevor, Councillor Meaton, they've already seen improvements in terms of the amount of time that utility companies are spending digging up the roads go down. I think we do have quite an acute problem in the city. We're a long, thin city. So our trunk roads that go from east to west are particularly important. When they're affected, you can see real backlogs. So I think it's great that we're doing this. The sooner the better, in my opinion. I'm really glad we're bringing it forward, and thanks to officers for thinking of this and for making this recommendation. The additional income and revenue that it could raise as well for us to reinvest in the road network, I think, is significant. So that's great. Fantastic. Do colleagues agree with the recommendations? Agreed. That brings us to our adult social care improvement plan. Councillor Alexander.
Hello again, everyone. I'm pleased to introduce the Adult Social Care Improvement Plan, which sets out how we strengthen the quality, consistency and sustainability of our services over the coming year. This follows our Care Quality Commission inspection outcome that we received in December. As you will be aware, we received a requires improvement rating with an overall score of 48%, and we received a Section 50 notice regarding our challenge performance in relation to annual reviews of people's care and support and waiting times for assessment. Adult social care plays a critical role in supporting some of the most vulnerable people in our city, and the pressures on the system continue to be significant in terms of demand, complexity of need, workforce capacity and financial constraints. This plan has been developed to respond directly to these challenges, and as a response to the findings from the recent inspection and in our performance reviews, our engagement with residents and carers and our own internal assurance work. The plan is built around a clear ambition to deliver safe, high quality, person-centred practice, to improve outcomes for residents and to ensure that we are using our resources efficiently and responsibly. It also reinforces our commitment to prevention, helping people maintain independence for longer, and to working in strong partnership with the NHS, the voluntary and community sector, and care providers across the city. Within the plan, we have identified a number of priority areas for improvement. These include strengthening practice standards in assessment and safeguarding, improving our use of data and performance management, and further developing a stable, resilient provider market that can meet current and future needs. We are also focusing on workforce development. recognising the importance of supporting staff with the tools, training and leadership required to deliver consistent, high-quality practice. Significant progress is already underway. Over recent months, we've introduced new approaches to case auditing, improved our oversight of quality in the provider market, and we've begun to streamline parts of our operational processes. We are also working more closely with health colleagues on integrated pathways, particularly in re-enablement and hospital discharge. These early steps are building a strong foundation for the wider improvements that are set out in the plan. We have already improved our performance since the inspection visit last April. In relation to annual reviews, these have increased from 29% of reviews undertaken on time to 41%, and we expect to reach 55% by next year. And wait times for assessments have been significantly reduced at our access point in adult social care and in learning disability services. I also want to mention that we've taken on board feedback and comments from the recent People Overview and Scrutiny Committee. For example, following feedback from members of the committee, we have renamed our work on how we support people who are waiting for an assessment from a waiting well framework to a waiting safely framework, as committee members felt that the term waiting well didn't quite fit right. We've also received excellent feedback from Peter Hay, the Department of Health and Social Care appointed advisor, who will be working with us over the next 6 months or so on addressing the Section 50 notification, which we are confident we will have completed and satisfied by this summer. Today, Cabinet is asked to endorse the improvement plan, noting the actions, the milestones and the governance arrangements that accompany it. We have put in place a clear framework for delivery with regular reporting through our internal assurance structures and updates to members to ensure visibility of progress and risk. I also want to acknowledge the commitment of our staff and our partners who continue to work incredibly hard in a demanding environment. This plan provides us with a focused and coherent route forward, and we are confident that with continued support and oversight, it will and is already delivering the improvements that our residents deserve. Please do feel free to ask any questions.
Thanks very much, Councillor Alexander. Questions and comments on the Adult Social Care Improvement Plan? Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. As you know, in my role, I meet quite often with the Parent and Carer Council, which relates to children and young people. And they raised with me that they wanted to make sure that in catching up on undertaking reviews, that the age of 18 to 24 people that are waiting is really critical. And so I just wondered if you could tell me a bit about what was in place to deal with those concerns, because obviously they're going to be moving through very soon or now. Yeah. So, yeah.
So within the Specialist Community Disability Service, there is a unit called Pod 2, which supports young people with disabilities that are aged from 14 to 24 years of age. And we do actually there is a manager of the service, Lorraine Hughes, who sits within the Family and Children's Wellbeing Department. And it's this team that do the Care Act work for young people who are approaching 25. And Lorraine does work closely with the head of service for access in adult social care. And they deliver our transition transitions panels, which do the planning several times a year for this cohort of young people. So there is good joined up working already to try and smooth the journey into adulthood and post 25 support. We do actually have a multi-agency transition strategy in the council that Adult Social Care has led on with the family and children's wellbeing colleagues. And also they've been working with the NHS and Amaze and PAC on this. And there has been quite a lot of work done recently to develop a plan for supporting young people into adulthood, involving the young people themselves and their carers. And this went to People Overview and Scrutiny Committee last March. The transition strategy has a delivery plan that is ready to be launched very shortly. And this is pending the recruitment of a transitions program manager, which the adult social care team has secured funding for the next 3 years from April. And this has also been joint funded with some funding coming from the ICB. So there is a manager who works closely with adult social care, and strategically we have secured a resource to take forward this work. So there is a lot of joined up work going on, but I agree it's really important, and I think we should, you and I, Councillor Daniel, should get together and sort of look at the plan closely and sort of, you know, look at deeply the sort of the process and how we'll make the transition better for the cohort of young people. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Alexander and Councillor Daniel. Councillor Robbins.
It's neither a question or it's just really a comment on a really positive experience I had with the adult social care people over the last couple of weeks. I received a phone call from a resident who was obviously fairly distressed, and I spoke to her for a long while. She obviously had something, she kept forgetting why she'd rung me. She was disturbed by various things, and in the end we sort of unsatisfactorily, I said to her, you know, I'll see what I can find out for you. I put the phone down. This was about 7 o'clock at night, and I looked up, there was an out of hours number for adult social care. So I rang them, fully expecting to get an answer phone which said to me, please leave your name and number and we'll get back to you, or some such thing. But I got a perfectly, you know, very, very helpful woman on the other end who took all the details I had of this resident, said you know, that they'd make sure she was okay, that they would get in touch with her the next day, see if they had. She was obviously very vulnerable and you know, was needed some assistance, but they were really, really helpful, and it helped me in so much to put my mind at rest as much as anything. So it's not a question, but just a comment on how helpful they were for me. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Robbins. Any other comments or reflections? Thanks very much for the work on this and to officers. And I know there's been a huge amount of work going on internally since we received the CQC last year. And I know that was a difficult moment for the service. And, you know, there is obviously lots of learning for us. I think, you know, to my mind, one of the positive things that sort of came from that moment and from looking in detail at the report was that even though there are clearly areas of our practice where we need to make significant improvement, what has been very clear to me is that we understand ourselves and we understand, you know, where we're doing particularly well and have, you know, areas of really positive practice. And it's clear in the report, you know, when it comes to the percentage of adults that are setting goals and achieving those goals, we are, you know, we benchmark much higher than the national averages. but also understanding, where our particular kind of acute areas of improvement are. And obviously a big one is around waiting times and how we kind of monitor that. On that, it looks like there has been really significant progress, although it looks like there is a bit of a kind of backlog building up more recently. So obviously something that we just have to keep a really close eye on. But it's really clear that the service is taken really seriously the recommendations, and I can see that there's a lot of really positive work going on, including with our external partner now. Is there anything else you wanted to mention, Councillor Alexander?
I just wanted to say that at a recent Adult Social Care Performance Board meeting, what you were saying just then sort of came up, that the board members were sort of impressed, but by the fact that we knew where we needed to improve, and that was noted, and our improvement has been going a lot faster than, say, some other local authorities in a similar position who were really surprised and shocked at their sort of findings that they had. So it's, we're doing well as a learning organisation.
Yeah, absolutely. And our learning organisation framework is undoubtedly helping with that. Thank you. Any other comments or questions on the improvement plan? Excellent. If colleagues are happy, then do we approve the recommendations in the report? Agreed. That brings us on to the next paper this afternoon, which is the response to the notice of motion from October 25. And I've got Councillor Taylor to introduce.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update following the motion agreed at Council in October 2025, requesting officers to bring a report to Cabinet detailing any exposure of the East Sussex Pension Fund or of our Treasury Management or freehold land holdings to involved companies. Back in October 2025, the Council agreed a motion requesting officers to bring such a report. That information has now been compiled and set out in the paragraphs below. Before we get on to the content, it's just worth setting out for Cabinet and for the public a bit of detail on the governance arrangements of the East Sussex Pension Fund. The overall arrangements are a pensions committee, which is made up of members from East Sussex County Council, and then a local pension board, which is made up of equal numbers of employer and scheme member representatives. The committee currently comprises of 3 Conservative councillors, 1 Green councillor, and 1 Liberal Democrat councillor. The Pensions Committee has delegated authority to manage the fund's investments, administration and overall strategy. The Pensions Board exists to provide assurance and oversight of the scheme administration. It does not take investment or strategy decisions. It's important to note that Brighton Hove City Council has no control over the investment policy of East Sussex Pension Fund. This is determined by the 5 elected members of the East Sussex County Council, as detailed previously. In terms of the content of the report, which is set out, this refers to exposure of involved companies, which are those listed in a report by the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. These are predominantly and relate to illegal settlements in the West Bank. As Councillor Sankey covered earlier, this is the best and most official report and list of companies that could be used for such an exercise. The findings of the report set out that a review of our internal treasury management investments has confirmed that we do not hold any investments in companies listed on that OHCHR list. A review of our property holdings also confirms that we do not have any exposure to those companies. In terms of the pension fund, the leader of the council wrote to the chair of the East Sussex Pension Fund requesting information in terms of the fund's exposure. The information is as follows. East Sussex Pension Fund holds approximately 29.8 million at the time of request, which is 0.58% of total assets in companies identified on the list from the OHCHR. Those are primarily through equity positions in Booking Holdings Inc., Airbnb Inc., and Expedia Group Inc., alongside smaller exposures in Israeli banks and telecommunications firms. Fixed income exposure, i.e. bonds, is limited to Altis International Limited. East Sussex Pension Fund has a policy of active engagement with fund managers and companies, with exclusions for certain investments such as fossil fuels, controversial weapons, and UN Global Compact violations. Chair, as set out in the report, and as I said at the beginning, the Council has no ability to directly influence or change the investment policy of the pension fund. What the recommendations set out, beyond noting the content of the report, is that as part of implementation of local government reorganisation in the county, we would recommend that Brighton Hove City Council has more representation on the governance and oversight arrangements for East Sussex Pension Fund or any subsequent fund. Beyond the recommendations, and the leader may wish to come in on this, we can of course make representations to the pension fund, and so can others, about their holdings. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Taylor, for the report, and thank you to officers for this report, which implements the amended notice of motion that was passed at full council last October, despite what one of our opposition parties has been publicly stating. The report absolutely is in line with our constitution, it's in line with the law, and it fulfills the mandate that full council agreed. I don't think it's helpful for opposition parties to be spreading misinformation of the nature that I've heard earlier this afternoon. And as I said earlier, we're incredibly clear. I don't think anybody in this council, in this city, or in our wider community of Sussex would want any of our pensions investments, any of our holdings or investments to be inadvertently supporting human rights violations. And so it's really important that we identify if that is happening, which I think we have done by writing to the pension committee, and that we advise them. And I'm going to be writing to the members of that committee, and that we ask and advise that they change their investment strategy accordingly. More broadly, I think it's really important that we think seriously about having an ethical investment strategy for our pensions. I think, as Councillor Taylor's laid out, there are changes coming down the line in terms of national changes on pensions investment that may mean there is less local influence and control of pensions investments. Personally, I'm very supportive of what I think are the government's plans to try and ensure that our pensions investments are furthering our missions domestically, whether that's building more houses or whatever it might be. So I'm really supportive of those sorts of moves, but we must certainly make sure that there are no inadvertent investments supporting human rights violations. And I think this report lays out where there is currently an issue. We will take action and seek to influence those members of the East Sussex Pensions Committee that have influence in this area. And I think that's the very best that we can do as a council operating ethically in this space. Are there any other comments or questions? Councillor Mouton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Taylor. It's more of a point of clarification, just to make sure I understood what was said. Essentially, the political representation of the East Sussex Pension Board is one which has Conservative, Lib Dem and Green Party members, and so they are well placed to influence this, probably better place than us. And is that a fair assessment, noting particularly it was the Green Party that came here asking us to do that, and whereas perhaps they've got more voice on that board than we have ourselves?
Well, yes, I agree with that. I mean, I think the first thing to say is actually we actually had taken this action before the notice of motion came. So we were proactively looking at the issue. It's a sensitive issue, and I think we're handling it sensitively, but through the parameters of our values. So we had actually already written to the pension fund to ask about this. As you say, there is councillor representation on the governance of that board, none of which are Labour, but there are other parties represented. And yes, I would encourage opposition councillors who feel strongly about this, as we do, to contact their fellow party members on that board and make representations.
Thank you. And I think that's an important point to raise, Councillor Mooton. And there's one more thing that I want to say. As civic leaders, we have a really important responsibility around community cohesion in our city. And as Councillor Taylor says, we had already taken action on this issue, but we'd done so in a sensitive way, and we'd written to the pension committee. We hadn't sought the sort of theatre, the public theatre that I think the Green Party are looking to attract on this issue, which we saw some of earlier today. I feel really acutely the responsibility to ensure that everybody in our city feels safe, valued, respected, and that they can go about their lives free from fear and living with dignity. And that applies whatever somebody's background is, whatever their religion, whatever their race, whatever their worldview, to be quite honest. And I think it's a responsibility that we all have as civic leaders and that we should all uphold. I'm deeply, deeply disappointed in the Green Party of England and Wales. I think their cynicism knows no bounds on this issue. I think they use this issue to electioneer and to try and score political points. But I don't think, based on their action this afternoon and the way in which they sought to bring the issue back here, trying to direct it at the Labour Party when actually it's their own party that has more influence on this, on the East Sussex Pension Fund, I think really lays bare a really cynical political strategy that seems pretty far removed from trying to sort out, the horrors that we've seen taking place in Gaza and in Israel. And that also, I think, has proven to be deeply divisive in the city. So I'd really caution them once again to consider their behaviour in this area and to seek to uphold greater unity in our city. With no further ado, do we accept the recommendations in this report? Agreed. Thanks very much, colleagues. Our final report for today moves us on to territory of demonstrating that we are the most fun city in the whole of the country. Councillor Miller, if you would like to take up the mantle.
Outdoor events are integral to the identity of our city and continue to be a significant draw for people choosing to live and work in the region. Brighton and Hove's events programme generates an estimated £120 million gross added value to the regional economy. And as a city, we pride ourselves in our wonderful independent businesses, those many cafes, restaurants, pubs, bars, and independent shops which give our city such a unique identity. But as a city of only 277,000 people, we would struggle to support these many independent businesses without our vibrant tourism sector. And that tourism sector is hugely boosted by our equally vibrant events programme. We are indeed the fun city of the UK. While outdoor events have clear and defined benefits, improving community cohesion and boosting both our economy and the city's profile, both nationally and internationally, there are important balances to be achieved to ensure the benefits are not outweighed by the impact on residents living around event sites. The new outdoor event strategy sets out the path for Brighton and Hove to lead nationally over the next decade on a sustainable, accessible and proportionate events programme. By embedding resident needs at the centre of the strategic approach, while laying out pathways to access and contribute to national schemes such as the Green Events Code of Practice and Attitude is Everything, and facilitating a collaborative policy review across council departments, this strategy will ensure the delivery of outdoor events across all 4 of the council plan outcomes. The new strategy will leverage Brighton and Hove's market position, creative communities and reputation for active lives and progressive thinking to deliver on our central vision, an event programme to enhance nature, culture and healthy lives. Starting in 2026, the outdoor events team will utilise the tools available through inclusion in the Green Events Code of Practice pilot to benchmark all city events on sustainability and accessibility. In resident forums, both in person and online, key actions from the strategy will be shared and developed with those closest to the events. Brighton and Hove will position itself as a market leader in achieving national policy aims in decarbonisation, and aims to achieve the 30% reduction in carbon emissions detailed in the 3rd edition of the Show Must Go On report, which launched today. In 2030, the strategy will be reviewed to ensure the second half of the period is optimised to maximise positive impacts and realign approaches to changing national policy. Brighton and Hove's reputation for outdoor events is respected nationally and recognised internationally, placing the region in a position to compete with major cities such as Manchester and Liverpool. To achieve the best outcomes for city residents and businesses, it is vital that the events programme continues to use our brand position to drive the highest standards of delivery. Enshrining protection for our green spaces and the most innovative solutions to noise management are vital to protecting those who live around events. Delivering improvements to these areas through organiser levies also means that those most impacted will feel the tangible benefits of the programme to their areas. This strategy sets out the framework to take a good events programme forward to be a UK leading approach that places co-design with residents and communities at its core. I welcome any questions.
Thanks very much, Councillor Miller, and to officers for all the work that's gone into this. And I know also the listening exercises across the city to really try and lean into residents' feedback, both good and constructive, and to take on board some of those messages. And that really comes through strongly in this strategy. Councillor Mooton.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, Councillor Miller. May I echo the Chair's comments and thanks for the whole team. I know they work incredibly hard and the engagement level is very strong. I know you're going out to many communities and listening to what works for each part of the city. We know some parts of the city, some things happen and work really well, but perhaps that isn't applicable to another part. So we've got to find a sensitive event strategy that works well for each community is welcomed, and we know the vibrant dynamics of each of the communities where these events are happening. It really does make a big difference. One of the things from a transport perspective is, I guess the question I have is, how do people get there and back? How can we help people get there in more active travel ways? How can we make sure we've got secure parking of bicycles, for instance? People are confident that their bike will be safe while they enjoy the event. How can we work with our bus operators to encourage people to get their bus or even the train to come to an event, and think about the public transport offer, and how do we work with that to make an event work better through coordination with our transport team?
Thank you, Councillor Mooton, for that question. So, for instance, that question about cycling is one of the things that we're also looking at from a public health perspective, because we're looking at having healthy food offers, low alcohol, and all low alcohol offers, so that residents are able to enjoy themselves in a healthy way. And part of that is promoting active travel methods, so mandating bicycle parking, mandating safe storage for bicycle kits so that you can actually park that kit. One of the issues is often that you then spend the rest of the day lugging around a helmet, kit, but like I have my battery. So it's really great that we're looking to have both of those. We're looking at how we can improve bus access so that the event becomes a way to not only not impact negatively on transport, but actually to improve transport solutions in the area and to drive forward our active travel and air quality missions.
Councillor Robbins.
Thanks very much, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Miller. And we've sat together at various meetings over the last few weeks where we've had residents come and tell us exactly what they expect from the event. And one of the things that's come up time and time again is reinstatement of areas once an event has been held. And we know that it's not really realistic to start talking about reseeding in the height of summer during hot, dry spells and all. But what we've talked about, and I'm hoping you can expand a bit on it, is that perhaps we have a way of protecting grass areas or protecting play areas, but not so much play areas, but areas that people use for recreation during, before and during the event, rather than trying to just reseed and put it back afterwards. That there's a way of protecting it so it's not so badly damaged. And I think there is. So I don't know if you can just expand a bit.
Thank you, Councillor Robbins. Yes, one of the things, for instance, that was trialled at last year's Spiegel Gardens were different types of ground protection, because there is an understanding our festival season is May, and that does mean that reinstatement then has to wait months until the conditions are right. And so you've actually got, if it then starts raining in July for a week, you've got a mud bath. So actually, it has to be protection rather than repair, and that we've looked at different ways. We're continuing to finesse that, but certainly it was quite clear there that even from last summer's trial, one type of ground protection had much less impact on the grass. The grass recovered very quickly, and other areas didn't. So we will keep refining that and improving that, so that in the end, the impact is minimised as much as possible.
Thank you. Important point, Councillor Robbins and Councillor Miller. Any other comments or questions on the outdoor event strategy? Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say how well I think the team are doing now with the community engagement. And I'm really looking forward to when we become part of the strategical mayor authority. That's going to happen very, very soon. There'll be even more events coming to Brighton and Hove, and we just need to manage them well, conversing with our residents as we go along. As you said in your speech, they need to be sustainable and proportionate to the areas where they're being held. But yes, lovely. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. Yes, community engagement is at the heart of what the team is doing, and there's a recognition that communities are impacted. And for instance, until this year, the entirety from the Old Stein Valley Gardens level had one single license, and was treated as an absolutely identical space. And through the community engagement, became clear that the impact of events was very different at somewhere like the Old Stein, that to all the way through to level. There were residents, some places very close, some areas have hardly any residential dwellings, such as the Old Stein, that is mostly hotels. It's the pier, it's a very different kind of environment. So that's now been broken up into 4 areas. One area has been left completely unlicensed and will remain open for dog walking and relaxation. So this is a dynamic response. And so each meeting, we're looking at what's working and what's not working, and how we can continue to find that way through to protect our fabulous fringe, for instance, and still deliver the events that people love and that are so valued by the whole of the city.
Thanks very much. Any other comments or questions, colleagues? No, in which case is Cabinet happy to accept the recommendations. Thank you very much. That just leaves me to say does Cabinet agree to the part 2 minutes of the previous meeting as an accurate record? Agreed. Thank you very much, comrades. Does Cabinet agree that the items listed in part 2 should remain exempt for disclosure to the press and public? Agreed. Thank you, colleagues. I call this meeting to a close. Did I say comrades? I'm not meant to say.